Have you ever wondered what happens when a pilot says, "Let's take it easy on the autopilot"? You're sitting in seat 23A when suddenly the plane starts to climb. What's going on? Let's dive into how autopilot really works. When you're cruising along at 35,000 feet, everything seems calm and steady. But behind those big glass screens, there's a whole world of automation at work. It's like having a personal chauffeur. Except this chauffeur is super skilled and never needs to take a break. So, what exactly does the autopilot do? Well, imagine you're driving a car on cruise control. The car sets its speed and direction, but if you hit a bump or need to merge onto another lane, you still have to steer manually, right? It's similar with the autopilot. In fact, when pilots say, "Let's take it easy," they're often just taking back some of their hand from the throttles, essentially switching off part of the automation. But don't worry, there's always someone monitoring everything closely. And here's the surprising part. Even when the autopilot is on, pilots are still in charge. They can intervene at any time to make sure the plane stays safe and comfortable for everyone on board. Now that we've set the stage, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this magical system works. Okay, so let's dive into autopilot, because autopilot is like a super smart cruise control for your airplane. Imagine you're driving on the highway and using adaptive cruise control. It keeps your car at a steady speed and a safe distance from the car ahead, while autopilot does something similar but in the skies. When you're sitting in seat 23 during a long-haul flight, autopilot is there to keep the plane flying smoothly. No more pushing and pulling on that little yoke, that's your control column, to maintain altitude or speed. Instead, the pilots set the desired altitude, cruise speed, and heading. And once they hit those buttons, the autopilot takes over. And here's the surprising part. It's incredibly useful during long flights. You see, when you're flying for hours on end, especially across time zones, your body can get tired, just like mine might after a 12-hour workday. By handing off some of that responsibility to the autopilot, pilots can rest their hands and focus on other important tasks, or simply take some well-deserved breaks. But don't worry, pilots still have control. They can always override the autopilot if needed, like when you might need to hit the brakes in your car during an unexpected emergency. In fact, most airlines require pilots to manually fly the plane for a portion of every flight to ensure they stay sharp and ready. So it's not like the autopilot is taking full command. It's more of a helper that ensures everything stays on track. Imagine you're driving on a highway at night. You trust your car's cruise control to maintain a steady speed and keep you in the center of the lane, right? Well, autopilot works in much the same way, but for planes. When you're in an airplane, the autopilot is like having an invisible cruise control that keeps everything running smoothly up there in the sky. It uses sensors, think of them as a plane's eyes and ears, to measure key things like altitude, how high it's flying, speed, and heading, which direction it's pointing. These sensors send this information back to a central computer, which compares what the plane is doing to the pilot's set parameters. For example, if the autopilot was programmed to fly at 35,000 feet, it would constantly check whether the plane's altitude matches that setting. If there's any little deviation, let's say the plane starts climbing a bit too high, the autopilot will make small adjustments to bring it back down to the set altitude. It's like if your car's cruise control notices you're going a hair faster than 65 miles per hour and gently slows you back down. But here's the surprising part. Not only does the autopilot help with altitude, but it also takes care of speed and heading too. If the plane is getting a bit off course, the autopilot will make small corrections to keep it flying in the right direction, just like how your car's cruise control keeps you on speed. This all happens incredibly smoothly and quietly, often so much so that passengers might not even notice it's happening. The autopilot works 24/7, making tiny adjustments as needed, ensuring the plane flies safely and efficiently, no matter what the weather or conditions are like outside. So, when you're sitting in your seat on a flight, trust that the autopilot is keeping everything under control, just like how your cruise control keeps your car running smoothly on the highway. So far, you might have thought the autopilot is just a single magic box that does all the flying for us. But it's much more than that. The autopilot isn't really one device at all. It's actually a complex system made up of several smaller components, each responsible for controlling different parts of the plane. Imagine your autopilot as having tiny muscles, just like how your body has muscles in your arms and legs to move you around. In this case, these muscles are the control surfaces on the plane, the elevators at the back, the rudder at the tail, and the ailerons on each wing. And just like your brain controls your muscles so you can walk or run, the autopilot's brain sends signals to these control surfaces to make sure the plane stays steady in the air. Here's how it works. The autopilot's brain is actually a computer system that constantly monitors everything from the plane's altitude and speed to its position relative to where it needs to go. It then calculates exactly what little tweaks are needed for each of these control surfaces to keep us flying smoothly. And here's the surprising part. These little muscle movements happen all the time, almost like a dance you can't see. For example, if there's a tiny bit of wind pushing the plane off course, the autopilot will quickly and subtly move the elevators or rudder just enough to correct it. You might not even notice these adjustments because they're so small and frequent. All this happens behind the scenes, making sure we stay on course without us having to worry about it at all. It's like having a personal assistant who's constantly checking and adjusting everything for you, just without the need to drink coffee or take breaks. So far, Autopilot sounds almost like magic. These clever sensors and controls seem to do everything. But here's the surprising part. Even with all its fancy gadgets, the Autopilot can't do everything on its own. Imagine you're driving a car. The cruise control is your autopilot equivalent. It helps keep the speed steady, but it doesn't handle sharp turns or sudden stops. In the air, turbulence can come in unexpected bursts, like when you hit a bump while driving. Think of that time you were driving and suddenly felt the car jolt. Now imagine that happening to an airplane. When there's a sudden storm or extreme turbulence, the autopilot starts whispering, "I need help," and the pilots step in to take over. It's their job to set initial parameters, like altitude and speed, but they stay alert and ready to manually handle any unpredictable situations. For instance, if you've ever felt your car dip suddenly on a bumpy road, imagine that happening to an airplane. Just much more dramatic. And here's the part most people don't know. The autopilot gives them a gentle nudge when it's about to get out of control. You can think of this as the autopilot saying, "Hey pilots, I'm starting to struggle here." They then step in to ensure everything stays safe and stable. So remember, while the autopilot is incredibly smart, it's not a replacement for human judgment and intervention during extreme situations. The pilots remain the ultimate safety net. So, why should you feel reassured by Autopilot? Because it's incredibly reliable. In fact, most commercial flights spend about 90% of their time under autopilot control. The pilots are there to monitor and intervene only when necessary, like a co-pilot driving with cruise control engaged. Imagine you're sitting in seat 23A on your next flight. You feel that smooth, gentle descent into the airport. The plane is gliding down at a steady speed, but it's not because of the pilot's hands. The autopilot is doing all the work. It's like having an experienced driver who knows every twist and turn of the runway. The autopilot system uses advanced technology to keep the plane on its optimal flight path, ensuring safety by maintaining altitude, speed, and course with incredible precision. In fact, the autopilot can do this so well that it often flies the plane to the exact spot where it needs to touch down. It's like having a smart cruise control for your car, but for an entire airplane. And here's the surprising part. While pilots are there to monitor and intervene if needed, in reality, they rarely have to step in. The autopilot is so reliable that most commercial flights stay on autopilot from takeoff to landing. This means you can enjoy your flight with minimal worry, knowing the plane is being handled by some of the most advanced technology out there. So, next time you hear the gentle hum of the autopilot during your flight, remember, it's working hard to keep everything safe and smooth for you. You don't need to do anything. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride.